Another aspect of the case of Nnamdi Kanu, which we have not examined, has to do with the performance of Nigerian judiciary in that case overall. Even though the final judgment and the trial by Justice Omotosho was excellent and met all the standards one would expect in terms of due process and judicial rigor and fairness, despite that, if we examine the total performance of Nigerian judiciary, that is, if we examine all that had happened in all the courts since 2015 when Nnamdi was first arrested, we're going to come to the conclusion that Nigerian judiciary contributed to the confusion which had continued to linger in that case. Let me explain to you what happened. He was arrested in October 2015, charged, I believe, early in 2016. However, the case did not advance. He was remanded in prison altogether for 18 months before he was granted bail. The question is, why would it take so long for that case to progress? After he was granted bail, he left the country and was brought back to Nigeria in June 2021. Since then, the case lingered in court. There was slow process, slow progress. But three important things happened. Three important judgments occurred which had caused so much confusion in that case. First, Nnamdi Kanu's lawyer, Aloye Ejimako, was able to get a judgment at the State High Court in Abia State, Umuahia. I will give you the citation of that case because it's important. In that case, at the State High Court, Nnamdi challenged the fact that soldiers came to his house in September of 2017, which according to him was the reason he left. He left Nigeria. The court determined that the soldiers going to his house was a violation of his fundamental right, and that him running from the soldiers was justified. Therefore, he did not jump bail. So you have a situation where a federal high court in Abuja was saying that Nnamdi jumped bail, and a state high court in Imo State, a court of coordinate jurisdiction, was saying that he didn't jump bail. At that moment, you already have, in the mind of an ordinary person, two judgments that conflicted. Which one would they believe? Did he jump bail or did he not jump bail? Initial confusion. But in addition to that, that court awarded a damage in the amount of 1 billion naira to Nnamdi Kanu against Nigerian government. That was a definitive statement by a court of competent jurisdiction that Nigerian government had acted like a rogue player. It violated the rights of a citizen facing trial. That was a big victory for Nnamdi Kanu. But also there was a second case taken by the same Nnamdi Kanu's lawyer, Aloye Ejimako. Now at the Federal High Court, also in Umuahia. In this second case, Aloye Ejimako challenged the extraordinary rendition of Nnamdi Kanu into Nigeria. He argued that that rendition was a fundamental violation of his right and that Nigerian government ought to be held accountable for that act. The Federal High Court of Umuahia agreed and awarded damages in the amount of 500 million. So now you've got a situation where two high courts, State High Court Abia State, Federal High Court Abia State, we are now taking a position different from the decision of Federal High Court in Abuja. Put yourself in the mind of a non-lawyer. He is going to detect confusion. Which one will he believe? Which one makes sense? Is this man wrong or right? Is government wrong or right? It did not end there. The judgment of Inyako was taken on appeal to the Court of Appeal, Abuja Division. And the Court of Appeal looked at it and examined critically the implications of extraordinary rendition. And the Court of Appeal found that the extraordinary rendition was a fundamental violation of right, international law as well. And the court said it was serious enough to bar Nigeria from trying Nnamdi. In other words, you brought him into Nigeria in violation of law. We will not allow you to try him based on that. In other words, you are not going to benefit from a wrongful conduct. This was fundamental. So now you've got 4 judgments. High Court by Nyako, Court of Appeal in Abuja, then the 2 High Court cases in Umuahia. These 4 judgments are confusing. 3 of them are similar in favor of Nnamdi and 1 against Nnamdi. The federal government took the case to the Supreme Court. And when it came to the Supreme Court, normally, even though these courts are supposed to operate separately, but they're supposed to be conscious of what is happening. Just as the court was conscious of the fact, recently, the court that denied his fundamental rights claim was conscious of the fact, took judicial notice of his conviction that has sent him to Sokoto prison and said that his request is now academic. It meant that the court can always take judicial notice of what is happening in other courts. So these courts were ruling without consideration of what is going on in other courts. So the Supreme Court, in reversing the Court of Appeal, a fundamental victory, Nnamdi won, and the Court of Appeal was being reversed by the Supreme Court. We would have expected a more extensive judicial opinion, an extensive rationale. That's what the Supreme Court is supposed to do. Seeing that there is substantial confusion in the lower courts, the Supreme Court will embark upon a rationale that will try to explain all this confusion and establish some level of clarity for the ordinary person. The Supreme Court reversed the Court of Appeal halfway and agreed with Court of Appeal halfway, which is again a source of confusion. And the case went back for trial. So, if you look at the performance of the judiciary as a whole in this case, you are going to find out that whereas lawyers can understand and make necessary distinctions between these various rulings or judgments, an ordinary man in the street is going to be thoroughly confused about it. And they were confused about it. If you recall, during the last days of Nnamdi's trial, there was this belief that Nnamdi was being tried under an unwritten law, that Nnamdi was being tried under a law that had been repealed as at the time of the offenses. All kind of confusion arose, and they linger to today. Wherever you go, many people, non-lawyers, honestly believed that the judgment of Motosho was predetermined, that it was unfair, that Nnamdi was railroaded, and Nnamdi was denied due process of law. And that is exactly what we want to avoid. The role of the court is to give clarity and finality and definitiveness to all issues of law. People who have gone through the courts are not supposed to come out confused as to what the law is. In that respect, Nigerian judiciary as a whole failed. All right? And I'm sure these will be part of the things to be considered by those who will eventually...
In the heart of the city where stories unfold, Gentle Media TV shining bright and bold, bringing news from the corners of the globe, connects us together, no matter the road. Watch us rise, hear the voices roar, unity and diversity, together we